Good morning, evening, afternoon, or whatever time it is, wherever you're at. This week I finished building not one, but two different guitars. I thought it would be kind of fun to take a look back at all the weird guitars that I built over the last couple years. If you're thinking about building a cheap guitar, or a kit guitar, Partscaster of some sort, or if you just like looking at weird guitars, then you're in luck. If not, I don't know why you clicked. Anyway, we'll get back to these two at the end. But we'll start by taking a trip back in time to what was my first guitar. And like many aspiring young musicians, it was a Squier Bullet Strat. Now, I'm not going to pretend they're amazing guitars, but for the money, they really are some solid starter instruments. Anyway, I got bored after a couple months, painted it to look like a JCPenney's tie, wired all 3 stock pickups in series, then undid that because it sounded like mud, then scalloped half the fretboard, which did not make me Yngwie Malmsteen. After a while, I wound my own replacement bridge pickup with a broken fishing reel, and coil tapped it for higher and lower output options. And because I don't have it with me, here's a video of young Matt playing some tasteful licks to show how that coil tapping sounds. Then finally, I gave it a glossy burst finish to mellow out the business casual aesthetic, so it went through quite the journey over just a couple years. I won't spend too much time on these first couple because I don't have them here to test, and also because I barely remember the next one. I got 3 different Strat-style necks and a bunch of random pickups and hardware junk in a deal from Craigslist, and some of that made its way into this. The PV neck on it was actually pretty decent, but the plywood body felt like it was made of lead. The pickups were wired with a volume control for each to blend all 3 together, and that's about as far as I remember. I don't miss it, but I hope someone out there is enjoying its quirks and features. My first attempt at making a body, then, was the Les plywood. If it looks a little weird, that's because the body is scaled smaller than a real Les Paul to fit the wood scraps I had, and it's also substantially thicker. The chambering on it was a weird mess, but pretty cool. Not that it made the thing worth playing. It honestly sounded decent enough, and I don't think the plywood was holding it back tonally, but it was just such a mess ergonomically it wasn't any fun to play. The last of that particular Craigslist haul was the cream of the crop, which honestly wasn't saying too much. I painted a very exacting replica of Eddie Van Halen's Frankenstrat, and it turned out really nice. I think this one was actually wired that the neck pickup worked with the Gibson-style 3-way switch. Not a bad addition. Here's a little demo. And that's about as much as I dare play before getting a copyright strike. Man, it sounded pretty good when I had time to practice. A quick honorable mention goes to this Squier P bass body. I tried painting it, which involved both painter's tape and dish soap, and it came out okay. It wasn't quite cool enough to call it quits though, so I asked a friend to paint it. While it came out looking pretty awesome, the acrylic paint and enamels didn't mix well at all, and it bubbled up so badly I gave up entirely and built a new body from scratch, which we'll turn up later in the video. next up, I believe this was actually the first kit guitar that I built, and this was the cheapest 335 style kit that I could find on eBay. I think it came out to under 150, and I actually used pretty much all stock tuners. Okay, I did swap the nut out for a Tusk nut. I'd say if you're on an extreme budget, that's probably the best $10 you're going to spend upgrading one of these. Just so much easier to keep it in tune. Yeah, stock pickups, they actually sound fine. They're not incredibly clear, but they sound good, especially for this style of guitar, where you're often looking for a more mellow sound. Stock bridge works fine. Even the stock electronics work just fine, although I do have to say, I would not recommend a 335 kit for your first attempt wiring a guitar, because trying to feed all the pots and switches through this little F-hole, there's no compartment in the back, so all wiring has to be done through this little hole. It's all four of these pots, the switch, the output jack, the ground wire to the bridge. It's not fun. But the end result is pretty great. I will say with this cheap kit, the frets were in really rough shape. Had to do some really severe fret leveling. That took a long time, wasn't the easiest, and it also lowered the frets. I prefer medium jumbo frets, and these are definitely in the vintage range now after getting them all level. So it's not a bad thing. It still plays smoothly. I don't pick this guitar up as often as I would if it had more comfortable frets. That said, the sound is great. I think my favorite thing about this, and this goes for most semi-hollows, is just how easily and how musically it feeds back. Watch now that I say that. I can't get it to do it, but I have to crank this up. It's just a very controllable feedback. Let's give it a little more beans. Okay, we'll stop bugging the neighbors now. But yeah, it's just it's a fantastic sounding guitar. Just the combo of the combination of the 335 body style and the flat frets makes it not my favorite to play. If you do have another $30 to $50 to spare when you're building a kit like this, just upgrade the tuners. These make it unpleasant to tune. They mostly work. It's worth it. Next up, this one catches everyone's eye, and it was a fun one to build. Also, probably one of the cheapest, if not the cheapest, at least the cheapest that I still have. After how I was feeling about the last one, I took a similar approach and just got the cheapest Tele kit on eBay. I think that came out to about 80 bucks. And then I sold the body from the kit for another 20 to 30 bucks back. So there's only about $60 all told in this guitar right now. All stock hardware, didn't even replace the nut for this one. The only thing that didn't come with the kit is the body itself, and that was made from some old 2x6s in my parents' shed. So yeah, it is 2 layers of 3/4 inch pine, which I believe is what the original Telecaster was made out of, or at least the Squier or Broadcaster. Or someone correct me on my Fender history there. It twangs like a Tele should. I've never loved the look of Teles. I mean, from the headstock, the body shape, they're kind of ugly guitars. Fight me on that. But what I do love about them is the simplicity, the durability. This feels like you can just throw it off a cliff, pick up where you left off, making music 5 minutes later. I especially love the control configuration. I've never been a big fan of the 2-volume, 2-tone configuration on the Gibsons. I'm sure you can use it to great effect, but I just don't care. This is perfect for me, if not still excessive, and we'll see that on the next couple guitars. As much as I do love the crunchy tone on the bridge pickup, the neck pickup, I feel like that's been lacking in Telly's from the start, and with a kit like this going as cheap as possible on these parts, it's even worse. The neck pickup's just, it's not bell-like or clear in any way like a Strat neck pickup would sound. It's just, it's not even smooth like a neck humbucker on the 335. It's just muffled. It feels like someone's throwing a blanket over the amp. Low chords have no clarity, no definition. It's just not for me. But it looks so cool. I mean, I guess I should, clarify then that the pickup surround there, that was aftermarket, $5, whatever. Yeah. If you'll forgive my playing, this one's actually one of my favorites. I don't know that it was the theme going into it, but yeah, it basically came out as if Eddie Van Halen went through a Jimi Hendrix phase. First off, the elephant in the room, the switch here. What's it do? In its default position, it's wired as the bridge pickup and neck pickup in series, basically as one really wide humbucker. It ends up being something like the middle position on a Telecaster, but being wired in series instead of parallel quadruples the output effectively. It's a pretty high output. This is with no more gain than the last guitar. However, flip the switch on, and it adds the middle pickup, but in parallel. I don't remember the math off the top of my head, but it cuts the output significantly. As well as when you have so many pickups all together in close proximity, there winds up being a lot of phase canceling going on between them. It kind of flattens out the tone, in a sense. You don't end up with the peaks and harmonics like you do when it's just focused on one spot of the strings, I guess. It ends up having almost, in my opinion, a kind of acoustic quality to it. So it's just, I don't know. If I want to pick up a guitar just to strum and sing to without putting much thought into the tone, for practice especially, this is often it. That might change with one of the ones that I just built, but they still sound completely different. So, yeah. Enough about the sound. The build, yeah, this is just a really really cheap, beat up, I want to say like an Austin Strat copy, some really, really cheap Strat copy that I got off Craigslist. Someone did a half job of sanding through the finish, and I didn't even bother to finish that. There's still some red paint poking through some parts. The neck then, again, college budget years, was the cheapest Strat copy neck that I could find on Amazon. It was $35. It's insanely cheap for an entire neck, the frets and everything. Nut, yeah, haven't changed that. The tuners were the tuners were the cheapest half respectable brand on Amazon, $15-20. They work fine. Actually got an American Standard string tree on here. It's probably the most bougie part of the whole thing. And the pickups, I think these are mismatched. I don't recall if some of these came from my first Strat or if they all came from a junk pile from Craigslist. They sound fine. The wiring has a bigger effect at this point anyway. Yeah, that's about it. I have five springs in here to really clamp down the bridge since I don't use the tremolo on this. It needs the help with this tuning stability. A good little tip if your Strat's kind of noisy, the springs, is to slip some aquarium tubing in here. 1/4-inch silicone tubing just slides right in, and it really effectively dampens it. Basically never needs to be replaced. I do that on most of my Strats. Enough said about this one. If I had to pick a weirdest instrument that I've built, it's this one. This is an electric Balalaika ukulele. As the name suggests, it is a Balalaika-shaped ukulele, so it's got 4 strings, standard ukulele tuning. Might be baritone ukulele, I forget exactly. But it looks like a Russian folk instrument, which is pretty cool. And it is powered by a little piezo pickup under the bridge. This is for just a normal ukulele. And it's got full-size guitar tuners on there and output jack, and that's it. One problem with this instrument that I've never gotten around to fixing is there's no way to ground a ukulele because it's got nylon strings. The only ground point is the jack here, and we could run something up to the bridge, which would normally be the fix. Without metal strings, there's still nothing to ground it to you, unless you're constantly palm muting. I guess that would be a workaround. This type of pickup already has a really low output. If we turn it back to the clean setting that the other guitars have been on, yeah, I don't know how to play the ukulele. But it's extremely low output, so it needs some gain to come close in volume, and then you've just got that buzz. But it's very, very tameable, so might try like a wrist strap that grounds it, but only if I'm actually going to learn to play the ukulele. This also was the only instrument that I built pretty much entirely from scratch. Aside from the tuners and the bridge, the body was just a couple pieces of pine, and notice a trend here, and the neck was also a large piece of pine. It is an extremely fat neck that puts most Gibson baseball bats to shame, but would be my first choice as a home defense weapon. around the same time that I was building the Balalaika, Ukulele, I also built my first bass. Now the body was clearly Thunderbird or Firebird inspired. I forget what's what. But I think I took a few artistic liberties with the dimensions around the edges. Yeah, this one's really cool looking. I'm just really happy with how this one came out. It's again mostly made from pine, but with some additional oak strips down the middle. I think that adds a lot to the look. You can debate whether it changes anything with the tone or not. I know nothing about bass tone either, so I can't speak to the quality of the pickups. All that I know is that at a 34-inch scale length with round wound strings, it's much funkier, more slappable than my short scale Beetle bass with flat wound strings, and honestly those two cover as many bass tones as I'm able to pick apart. Yeah, the neck started out life on a Squier P bass, and it's pretty decent. It's had some rough years, but it's perfectly good neck. And the tuners came from the same bridge. The plate and electronics were cut down from that. I might have ordered the knobs separately. And the pickups were something cheap from Amazon. I just thought they looked cool. Yeah, it's bass. Alright, this is one of the two guitars that I finished building this week, and without a doubt, it's the prettiest of the lot. There's no competition. I say finished, there are still a couple kinks to work out with this one. The main being that this wraparound bridge sits too high for this guitar, even when tightened all the way into the body. It's just, the angle is such that that the higher up you go on the fretboard, the worse the action gets. Up until here, it's not very pleasant to play. However, there are a couple things that I really like about it. So this is my first instrument with P90 pickups. It's not the last you'll see of these. And yeah, they sound great. These are is it LYWS, a Chinese knockoff of the I think it's Seymour Duncan Fat Cats. They're just humbucker sized P90s, so it's still a single coil pickup. And I'll show some pictures of inside the pickup. It's really just a big single coil. There's nothing special about it, except that they look really cool from the outside. The main body and the neck came from a kit, also from China, but this time a little on the higher end. I think it was almost $200 for the body and neck without any hardware. But just look at it. It was so worth it. The neck, actually, they custom made. They were only currently offering it in rosewood and white inlays. I asked them for maple and pearl inlays, and no extra cost, they did it, so that was awesome. It has this gorgeous quilted maple veneer. That said, it is still a veneer, so if you're one of the purists, you have to have the entire 1/4-inch maple top be pure AAA quilted maple. This isn't it. It's a really thin veneer. But does it matter? The one place where that did matter was when sanding it in between coats of stain. You can't sand too aggressively, sand too much off, because you will quickly sand through the veneer. So I couldn't sand back the initial black coat as much as I had planned to really accentuate the grain, but it looks fine. So yeah, this was also the first guitar that I finished in lacquer instead of poly or enamel, and I like it. It doesn't make a huge difference on the body for me, but on the neck, the back of the neck turned out semi-gloss, but very smooth to play, and just feels great. The shape of the neck also just feels really natural under my fingers. Just want to keep playing it. The tuners on this are Hipshot open gear tuners. They shook out to about $50, so that's more than I spent on some of the other instruments. They're really, really nice. They feel great. They're also the first set of locking tuners that I've had, and I can't speak yet as to how much of a difference that actually makes in holding the tuning. They're still kind of breaking in the strings at this point, but yeah, they're really nice. They're really nice. Also, if you probably already saw, made a carbon fiber truss rod cover out of a couple layers of carbon fiber and epoxy resin. It's a lot of work, but it looks super cool too. So yeah, let's talk about the pickups and the wiring. So the bridge pickup, people have written epic long-form poems to how good a P90 and the bridge sounds. It's just got, you know, the bite of a single coil with at least some of the warmth of a humbucker. Now, I don't know if we can attribute that to the covers over the pickup or just how hot it's wound. The bridge pickup's about 8 kiloohms and the neck 7. So they are hotter than most single coils, but not all. And yeah, if anything, the neck sounds almost even better. It's just really pleasant to play. And of course, I'm biased. I just built the thing. It's new, it's exciting. And you'll notice there's no tone knob here, just the single volume, so. I feel like the pickups, in this guitar at least, are coming across as subdued enough that I'm not missing out on the tone knob. If I did need to tame down the high end, that's what the treble knob on the amp's for. Now this switch here. If it's in this position, the 3-way pickup selector works exactly as you normally expect. So, middle, neck. However, flick it to the alternate position, and you've got 2 additional options. One, actually it's just a kill switch. The other is the bridge and neck in series. So, remember the light switch Strat from earlier, how that had the neck and bridge in series too. Well, I wanted to have a similar option here without being confined to it, and yeah, so with 2 P90s in series, it's even fatter than the 2 single coils in series on that one. It's combined with the shorter scale length on this one, it's really It's just a wonderfully mellow sound. Let's go back and forth just a little bit between the series and parallel wirings, because it's the same two pickups, same guitar. Don't think you'll get a much better comparison of series versus parallel than this. So let's start in parallel, because that's what most people are going to be familiar with, what most guitars have. So notice how it's not really driving the amp at all, at least not with single notes. This preset is just on the edge of breaking up for most guitars. It is set to max volume. With these in parallel, it's just not unless you're really aggressively digging into it. So. It's still not really driving it, I should say, but yeah, that's more like it. It's just got way more power to it. I know on paper, at least, it's quadruple the power. Don't know that I would say that it feels that way, largely because sound itself is perceived logarithmically, I think, exponentially. It takes an exponential amount of sound energy to make something keep sounding louder. Look it up, there are plenty of better explanations. But yeah, it's not so noticeable in the volume, but in the drive, it's, yeah. The hope is that this wiring allows you some really fat lead tones, Brian May type guitar solos, and we'll see. But it looks so nice. You know how on some projects, everything that can go wrong does go wrong? Looking at the bridge on the last guitar, the veneer, that kind of stuff. On this one, nothing did. Maybe that's just because the expectations were so low, but once the paint dried, just slapped it all together and it plays great. Intonation still needs a little bit of fine-tuning, but it's almost there. The action, I haven't even touched these set screws, and it plays awesome. I should say there was a little bit of a wiring snafu at first, and let's talk about why. So the bridge pickup in this is the exact same set of cheap bridge pickups in the PRS style guitar. Nothing different. The neck pickup started out its life as the same pickup, but I took it apart. I'll put some pictures up in a second. Desoldered it, stripped out the wax, cut off the old coil, and rewound it entirely by hand. That took a while. But only to around half a kiloohm. So, recall it was about 7 kiloohms before, so I just gave it a very slight wind, and it comes out to just a fraction of the output of the bridge pickup. The reason for this is I didn't want the neck pickup to overpower the sound of the bridge pickup. I wanted it to fundamentally still be close to, you know, like a Les Paul Melody Maker Junior, whatever it's called, with just a P90 in the bridge. But I wanted to have a little bit more of that warmth from the neck pickup, just a little bit. So essentially what I made is a really wide, really mismatched humbucker. So it only bucks a little bit of the hum. It still has almost as much 60 hertz hum as a regular single coil would, but a little more warmth than just the bridge pickup. Now, it doesn't lose any of that top end bite because there are no volume or tone pots that can suck off
nice
to bleed off that high end treble. Even if you're running your tone pots and volume pot wide open, there's still just a little trickle of energy, and particularly the high frequencies that get lost. You know, less so with a 1 meg pot, more so with a 500 or 250 kilo ohm. Enough math though. It's extremely bright, might need to tame it more with the treble knob on there, but it's just... So it can be a little bit piercing, I think, and for that you might need to tame it down a little more with the treble knob on the amp. But I would rather have that top end and be able to take it off later, take it off on the amp or in post, than not have it and get lost in the mix. It handles a little crunch really well, I think. Again, it can get a little bit shrill. Just has this really raw snarl to it. It's pretty cool. The body I built myself, a couple pieces of pine, put some pictures up. It's actually chambered up here. There's one smaller, one larger chamber. They kind of help with the balance. It's pretty light and it's really well balanced. I wanted the weight to fall more in this area, so it just naturally hangs like this. And you'll notice the one thing that I didn't order yet was enough strap buttons, so still waiting on those. Yeah, it's very lightweight. I don't know how much of a difference the chambering makes in the tone. It may contribute something resonance-wise. Haven't played around with it enough to know yet. The neck is a Mighty Mite Strat neck. I've heard good things about them for years, but this was the first time I had the money to spring for it. And I remember the neck on the other Strat was about $30–40. This was about $130, so it's still not expensive compared to a authentic Fender, let alone a Fender American, Warmoth, that kind of stuff. But it's really good. It's really good. So this was specifically medium jumbo frets. It feels fantastic to me, and it has a satin finish to it, just a shade below semi-gloss, but very smooth. Feels excellent. I will say it did still have a couple little scratches, some spots in the finish. If I were going for a pristine guitar, especially if I had spent more on the neck, I would not be thrilled with that. It doesn't affect playability though. Obviously I already relicked the body, so it works fine for me. Just kind of a warning, like here's looks like a pencil almost, a couple spots where the finish is lighter or chipped off. But if you're just buying it to play, it doesn't really matter. The tuners here are Fender locking tuners. I believe they're the same that's used on a Fender American Strat. For the neck plate, I went with a Fender American styled cutaway, so get better high fret access. And I forget the name of this piece right here. It just looks cool. I like the overall aesthetic between that, this bridge. It's just very simplistic. I think the relic adds a little interest to it, and yeah, I'll talk for just one last second about the design of the body. Now, I based it, unsurprisingly, off a Strat. It's just what I'm comfortable with. The biggest tweak that I made to it was adding a couple more frets clearance here for high fret access. It's just very comfortable to reach up there now. you'd be struggling with that a little bit more with a standard Strat. The carves for the arm and the belly cut are pretty much the same as on a Strat, and yeah, other than that, it's mostly aesthetic differences. There's some mild beveled points to it at the edges. Yeah, that really about sums it up for now. Like I said, the strings are still breaking in on these, so I'm sure I'll have more things to fix, more things to talk about at some point in the future. The comment sections down below, presumably, if you have advice, thoughts, favorite guitar, unsolicited political opinions. Yeah, that's what it's there for. Thanks. Yeah, so as always, have a good day. Have a good life. Or at least try to. And I'll see you next time.